Here's my two deep depth chart for the Miami Hurricanes and which players can take a wrecking ball to this.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, free on YouTube, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On this episode, we'll talk about whether or not the ACC schedule makers are trying to set Miami up to fail with that weird schedule that they put out earlier this week for the Hurricanes. We'll talk Miami Hurricanes, former Canes, shining at the Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine, and how that makes us feel about, falling short of our ultimate goals this past year. There are new crystal ball recruiting predictions for Miami, but folks, I wanted to start with my educated guesses and my informed opinion on what Miami's too deep depth chart is going to look like for the 2025 season. Now, the reason why at the top I said there are players that can take a wrecking ball to this, folks, because you've got off-season workouts in progress right now. You've got spring practices starting in a little over a month. All of fall camp is still in front of us. You've got players that I will refer to as wild cards who maybe not in my too deep right now, or maybe not starting right now, that I think can take that wrecking ball and make us reimagine this depth chart in a few months, or at least heading into the first game of the season. Now, when I give you my depth chart for certain positions, I'm going to tell you guys like, hey, this is pretty much set in stone, like 10 of 10 confidence, 9 of 10 confidence that this guy's going to be a starter. There are some positions that are seemingly decided already, others where there's going to be some competition. And again, there are certain wild cards that are going to come into play here. We'll start with quarterback. Now, I can tell you with a firm 10 of 10 confidence level that your starting quarterback is going to be Carson Beck. You didn't bring him in from Georgia to be the backup, and he's got so much more experience than anybody else in that quarterback room. I know he's recovering from the UCL, but we all know Carson Beck is going to be Miami's starting quarterback. There's no mystery there. He's my number one. For my number two quarterback, I know some of you are going to push back on this, but until proven otherwise, I've got Emory Williams on my two deep as Miami's backup quarterback. He's the next most in terms of experience on that roster, having started a couple of games, having played in a handful of games for the past couple of years, heading into his third year. I've got Emory Williams penciled in as Miami's number two quarterback, but there's a big wild card, folks, at that position, and that's Luke Nickel. So you got Luke Nickel coming in as a true freshman who looks to have the pedigree to maybe be Miami's next starting quarterback after Carson Beck's one-and-done year. And so how quickly is Luke going to take this quarterback competition by storm? And with Carson Beck being probably unavailable for spring football due to his recovery from the elbow injury, you're going to have Luke Nickel, Emory Williams, and Judd Anderson, the other three, I should say, backup quarterbacks on the roster, getting a lot of reps, first team, second team reps during spring football. So the big X factor to me is Luke Nickel. I could definitely see a scenario where Luke looks good enough to maybe be the number two quarterback. However, you'd also like the opportunity to preserve his red shirt, to not use him in more than 4 games, right? So he can carry that red shirt into next year. And so we will see. And then the other X factor would be, is Emory Williams for sure going to be on this roster after spring? I mean, depending on how that plays out with the other quarterbacks, I mean, a guy like Emory might look for an opportunity elsewhere. I hope he sticks around to provide that depth, but there's a big X factor there at quarterback. Luke Nickel is the ultimate wild card. At running back, honestly, it doesn't really matter to me which one starts because the top two are both going to play a lot. But I would imagine Mark Fletcher is your starting running back. I give that about a 9 of 10 or an 8 of 10 confidence. Jordan Lyle, of course, is the next man up. He maybe even would start some games. I'm very confident in my top two at the running back position. But, you've got a wild card in Gerard Pringle coming in as a true freshman. Pringle may be ready to challenge for some reps the same way Jordan Lyle did as a true freshman last year and the way Mark Fletcher did as a true freshman in 2023. So Gerard Pringle is an X factor. I'd also like to see Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, get involved and find some reps for him because he's very fast. And then another wild card at the running back position, folks, is does Miami add in, let's say, a veteran backup for depth purposes? I don't think they'll go out and get a starting caliber guy like they did with Damian Martinez last year, because I don't think you need somebody that good again, because Fletcher and Lyle, to me, are ready to carry that load. But Miami may look to add, for depth purposes, an experienced guy, maybe from a smaller school. So there could be another addition to come in that room. At tight end, this is another one where I don't necessarily care who starts, because I think at least two guys are going to get significant playing time there. So for me, for tight end, I've got my two deep as transfer Alex Bauman or second-year Elijah Lofton. Now, Lofton obviously has more athletic upside and is a guy who can play multiple different positions. So whether he's technically your starting tight end or not, he's going to play a lot. I could see either of those guys starting. I don't really care who starts. I think they're both going to play a lot. For wild cards at that tight end room, because you've got some youth there. One wild card I'm going to go with, a guy who could try to work his way up that depth chart, is Brock Schott coming in as a true freshman. Because, folks, off-season workouts have been going on for a couple of weeks, and we're already hearing good feedback about Schott, true freshman tight end, as someone who's turning heads already. Could he be more ready to play first year than a lot of us figured he would be? And then to me, like another wild card, because this guy's going to be on the roster for his third season and hasn't had a whole lot of burn, is Jackson Carver. How much is he going to be able to play next year? But I would imagine your top two guys are going to be Elijah Lofton and Alex Bauman. Those are going to be the ones that provide you the most reps at the tight end position this year. And also Miami, I don't want to forget to mention this one. Miami also added Luke Nichols' older brother, Jack Nickel, transferred in. So that's going to be another one to look for in that tight end room. All right, at the receiver spots, the two outside spots, I'm going to go with, for the first one, I'm going to have Josiah JoJo Trader holding down one starting spot. I'm going to call Nye Carr the second stringer there. I'm going to have CJ Daniels, the experienced senior transfer from LSU, holding down one spot. And I'm going to go out on a limb and have Joshua Moore, the true freshman, as a backup there, someone who can make the two deep of that depth chart. At the slot, there's a lot of X factors at the slot. I'm going to have Ray Joseph as my starter, with Malachi Toney, a true freshman, as my backup. But folks, there are wild cards galore at receiver and slot receiver, because one thing about slot receiver, that could be a spot where Miami might look to add a transfer addition in the spring. Miami already seemingly tried to do that with Zachariah Branch, who came down and visited, ultimately chose to go to Georgia instead, he and his brother. So I've got Ray Joseph and Malachi Toney, but there could be a transfer who could get into the mix there. And then I'm also not sleeping on Dalen Russell, another true freshman who had a really good high school career and could challenge for some playing time there. And then also, when you talk about potential transfers, that could affect the outside receivers as well, because Miami may look to add another proven guy to join that group. But for now, I've got JoJo Trader backed up by Nye Carr, CJ Daniels backed up by Josh Moore. I've got a lot of true freshman love on this list. And another X factor, by the way, is Chance Robinson heading into his second year. That's another one to watch. And Ray Joseph and Malachi Toney at the slot. On the offensive line, this room is full of proven, established starters galore. Okay. Markel Bell, I've got 10 of 10 confidence level. He's your starting left tackle. But I've got Samson Okunlola, the pancake honcho. I've got him penciled in as the second guy in my two deep at left tackle. And by the way, with the offensive line, you're going to notice there's a couple of guys that I have as backups at multiple positions, because Alex Mirabal cross-trains everybody. So there are certain offensive linemen that I think are too deep for multiple different spots, okay? At right guard or left guard, you've got Matthew McCoy. I have him penciled in as the starter, with Ryan Rodriguez penciled in as the backup. Remember, Rodriguez actually won that starting job in fall camp, but lost most of his season due to injury. Is he able to regain that spot, or will Matt McCoy hold it down? I expect McCoy to hold it down. At center, 10 of 10 confidence. James Brockermeyer is your starting center. This one's a tough one. I've got Nino Francavilla penciled in as my second string center because he's got a little bit more experience there. But the X factor here, SJ Alofa-Tuli. SJ coming in as a true freshman looks like Miami's probable center of the future. Is he going to be the backup as a true freshman, or does the more experienced Francavilla get the nod? At right guard, 10 of 10 confidence. Inez Cooper is your starter. I've got Ryan Rodriguez penciled in as the backup there. So I've got him as a backup at multiple spots. And right tackle, 10 of 10 confidence. CeCe Maui-Noa, one of the best players on the team, period, regardless of position. That's your starting right tackle. And I've got another one, multiple positions as a backup. I've got Samson Okunlola, the pancake honcho, penciled in as the number 2 right tackle. So again, with multiple guys, at least in my view, as backups at multiple positions, there are X factors galore on the offensive line. A big wild card is Tommy Kinsler, Big Bruno. Is he going to really solidify his position in the rotation this year, heading into his third year at Miami? What about Jaden Wilkerson? This is someone who's already getting buzz as a true freshman, as a guy who's a physical specimen and looks ready to contribute right away. Could he end up being a backup maybe at one of those guard positions already as a true freshman? So there are X factors there. Folks, the defense is super interesting. Where is Ruben Bain going to play full time? And what do we do with all this new talent at the defensive secondary? We'll talk about my 2 deep on defense when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here? We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. It's almost Super Bowl time. Guys, one game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff until the final whistle. Guys, I'm looking at some of these odds for Super Bowl 59. I am definitely leaning on the Kansas City Chiefs -1.5. I mean, all the Chiefs have done is win Super Bowls. They're going for the three-peat. So the Chiefs are 1.5 favorites against the Eagles. I lean strongly to Kansas City. I think there's value also in anytime touchdowns for these players to score a touchdown at any time in the game. I like Saquon Barkley at -195 to score an anytime touchdown. I also like Travis Kelce, and there's some extra value there at +130. So a $100 bet would win you 130 back on Travis Kelce to score a touchdown anytime in the game. So these are some of the things I'm looking at on FanDuel. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. By the way, you can bet $5 and potentially win $200 in bonus bets. If you bet just $5, if you win that bet, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your next listen, make sure you guys check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the conference, football and basketball, and otherwise available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so I gave you my my 2 deep depth chart with the wild cards, the guys who can take a wrecking ball to it on offense. Let's take a look at the defense now. The defensive end spots. We've gotten assurances that Akheem Mesidor, who was a team player and played mostly inside last year, he's going to be moving back out to the edge, which is better for him. And I think ultimately now better for the team as long as you have good enough depth in the interior. So Akheem Mesidor I've got as a starting D end, and I've got Malik Bryant at number 2 on that depth chart. Malik is someone who showed some really good signs last year in limited reps. I think he's ready to be an even more important part of that rotation this year. Other defensive end spot. There's a lot of X factors here, but I've got Ruben Bain penciled in as a starting defensive end and Booker Pickett Jr. as a backup. I am bullish on Pickett heading into his second year. There's a lot of wild cards there, guys. Cole McConaughey, who practiced very well as a true freshman last year, very physically mature. Marquise Lightfoot, who's got all the talent in the world, just putting on more size and strength. Can he blow up that rotation? What about Armando Blunt? Armando Blunt, who could probably play inside or outside, but probably more of a defensive end at this time. Can he crack the rotation? And then even one of my starters there at Reuben Hurricane Bain, is he really a full-time defensive end, or is he going to play a lot more defensive tackle this year? Because he's a tweener. He's got the size to potentially play both. So that's an X factor. Like Reuben Bain, I've got him penciled in as a starting defensive end. We could also see him in certain situations being a starting defensive tackle as well. For my defensive tackles, I've got Ahmad Moten as one starter, backed up by David Blay. And I've got Justin Scott as another starter, potentially backed up by Reuben Bain. So, other guys who are wild cards here, Artavius Jones, who I hear good things about in offseason workouts heading into his second year. Josh Horton heading into his third year. Is he really maturing and carving out a bigger role for himself at defensive tackle? Am I being unfair to David Blay, penciling him in as a second stringer, when he obviously comes from a smaller program at Louisiana Tech, but was, really good at the G5 level? Could he end up winning a starting job? I'm very bullish on Justin Scott, of course, heading into his second year. And I'm very bullish on Ahmad Moten, who had a really strong finish to last year. So that's where I've got for defensive tackle. For linebackers, I've got Wesley Besaint holding down one spot, and he's an X factor in himself because most of us would project him at weak side linebacker, but there is some chatter about him maybe moving to middle linebacker. But I've got Wesley Besaint penciled in weak side linebacker with Bobby Pruitt backing him up. And I've got Raul Popo Aguirre penciled in at middle linebacker with Jalen Alderman, experienced guy, backing him up. But there are definitely some wild cards there. Cameron Bobby Pruitt, can he push for a starting job? I had him penciled in as a backup. So that's how I see the linebackers. Cornerbacks, this gets tougher, guys. Defensive secondary gets tough because there's so many new faces. That room has been completely revamped. They've also got a new defensive backs coach in Zach Etheridge, who we did an episode on yesterday. And Zach Etheridge is going to have a lot of decisions to make on how he evaluates his defensive backs room. So I've got penciled in as starters at outside corner. I've got OJ Frederic backed up by Ethan O'Connor. I think Frederic, he's still going to have to prove it in practice, but, his stock soared based on his true freshman season last year. And then the other spot, I've got Xavier Lucas, who raised his stock at Wisconsin last year, backed up by Charles Brantley or Damari Brown. Damari Brown is a big X factor here. We'll talk about it. At nickel, I've got Charles Brantley and Damari Brown as my two deep there. So multiple spots for both of these guys. At safety, I've got at one spot Zaquan Patterson, backed up by Dylan Day. Dylan Day is another possible X factor because he had some good moments on special teams, especially last year. And then I've got Zechariah Poiser transferring in with high pedigree from Jacksonville State, holding down one spot, backed up by Markeith Williams. Damari Brown, I think, is the ultimate wild card in this deck because I think he's capable of playing just about every position in the defensive backfield. Can play outside corner, can play nickel. Gio Milian, we had a conversation with Gio a couple days ago. Like, he wonders if it's even possible that Damari Brown could move to safety because he's got a body type that could thrive there. And, Miami has fewer safeties, less safety depth than they do cornerback depth right now. So there could be a position change or two within the cornerback room. So Damari Brown is a big wild card. And then, of course, for a lot of these positions, and you notice I threw out a handful of true freshmen, but not a whole lot of true freshmen because we've got a blank slate and a clean slate with all of these guys coming in, right? I mean, there's a few guys, the Brock Schatz of the world who I mentioned, who are, already maybe turning some heads. Malachi Toney, Joshua Moore turning some heads in offseason workouts and stuff. But it's hard to give you hard line projections on the true freshmen until you see a little bit more. But there's definitely true freshmen in the DB room as well, with guys like Jabari Antoine, Chris Ewald, and Bryce Fitzgerald coming in. Can they get in the rotation year one? Ooh, another X factor that I didn't mention is Ryan Mack. Ryan Mack, who was a true freshman last year out of St. Thomas Aquinas, he saw his former high school teammate, OJ Frederic, get his opportunity to shine right away. Ryan Mack, I understand, was injured for most of the year, so he didn't have those same opportunities, but everyone speaks really highly of Ryan Mack. So is he another guy who can crack that rotation in year two at Miami? all of a sudden the defensive backfield is loaded. Like the defensive backfield depth went from major problem to like potentially an embarrassment of riches virtually overnight. And, something, by the way, we talked in an episode yesterday about new defensive backs coach, Zach Etheridge, who was just hired. Couple notes on Etheridge. I mentioned yesterday that Miami is still likely to bring in another DB's coach. That they're going to have two guys coaching that unit. I had apparently wrongly, I had Zach Etheridge penciled in as someone who would focus on the safeties. And I said that because he was recently a safeties coach at Auburn, and he played safety at Auburn, won a national championship there in 2010. But I'm actually hearing since last night that Etheridge would likely focus on the cornerbacks. So he would likely be the cornerbacks coach, with Miami maybe bringing in a safeties coach to be named later. Okay. So that you guys can argue it till you're blue in the face. That's how I view my too deep depth chart right now, with players who can be wild cards and taking a wrecking ball to that whole thing. When we come back, there's a couple of new crystal ball predictions for Miami. And you've got some Canes, and I love to see this, really shining at the Senior Bowl. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making us your first listen and your first watch today. If you want to become a Locked On Canes insider, get text messages directly from my phone to yours and vice versa. We'll answer some questions from the insiders on this episode. Click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes insiders chat. So Stephen Wagner from Cane Sport on 3 put in a couple of, they call them RPM predictions, but it's their version of crystal balls for a couple of recruits he thinks Miami is going to land for the class of 2026. And it's also nice to hear Miami making progress with local players. You want to keep those pipelines going. So he entered an on-3 prediction, did Wagner, with a 65% confidence for Miami to land top 75 cornerback Javari Flowers. We really like him a lot. Flowers is from Miami Northwestern. He's got a 4-star rating coming out of high school. So that's one that he put in an RPM prediction for. And he says that pick for Flowers is based on similar grounds for his pick for Miami to land American Heritage top 150 wide receiver Brandon Bennett. So those are two important local pipelines. Of course, Miami has had some good success with Heritage as of late, and Brandon Bennett is another 4-star rated guy according to On3 Sports. So Miami continuing to make some of that progress here when it comes to landing some of the top players from the area. So you like to hear that. Now, Miami, also former Miami Hurricanes, are making great progress, Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine Bowl. And folks, tell me if you had the same reaction than I did. When we're seeing these updates from Senior Bowl practices with the video of these reps happening, and we look at how a guy like Xavier Restrepo continues to shine, everyone who's out there scouting him continues to refer to him as like the most underrated receiver in the class, that Restrepo is getting good reps out there and really raising his stock. Elijah Arroyo, he looked like the reps I've seen. He's doing these one-on-one reps against defenders, and it's like I feel so bad for anybody who tries to cover him in these one-on-ones. Arroyo is smoking everybody, former Miami tight end. I see Damian Martinez, who's at the Senior Bowl, getting a ton of praise for his skills and his physicality. He's weighing around 225 pounds there. One of the notes that was mentioned was even though every year in college at Oregon State and Miami, he's always been listed in the 230s. He says he's never actually played in a season above 225 pounds. Jalen Rivers, by the way, is raising his stock with the reps that he's getting out there. And also players at the East-West Shrine. Jacoby George appears to be performing well. Andy Borregales, the kicker, he's met with 28 teams out there at the Shrine Bowl. So he's getting some interest when it comes to special teams. Could be a late-round draft pick, actually. Kiko Mauinoa doing well out there. Now, obviously not all of them, but most of the names that I mentioned are offensive players who are out there impressing NFL scouts and really maximizing their reps and raising their draft stock. Boy, does that make me angry again. Does that make me angry again? Looking back at last year, Miami had all this, and like Cam Ward isn't even participating because Cam Ward knows he's about to be the number 1 overall draft pick. So he has nothing to gain by being out there. all these other guys shining. It's like you had Cam Ward, you had all these Restrepos, you had Jacoby George, you had, Isaiah Horton is still in college, but he's out at Alabama. Elijah Arroyo out there shining. Miami had the number one offense in the country, number one offense. They couldn't make a couple more stops, and they would have been in the ACC championship game and in the college football playoff game. So it's like, I'm happy to see all these Miami players doing well in these Shrine Bowls and Senior Bowl practices, but it makes me angry all over again that we missed out on all of our goals for last year. I mean, 10 wins was nice, don't get me wrong, but ACC championship and college football playoff, I have a lot of regrets coming out of that. By the way, speaking on Miami's schedule, we get this one from Kane across the alley, one of our Locked On Canes insiders, who says, so it's hard to believe we're going to win both of those final two games. They found a way to screw us schedule-wise, even in a year when we get 8 home games. So, like, you picture the ACC schedule makers, they have, like, the villain mustache with the curls. They're like, Miami has 8 home games, but how can we make their schedule as difficult as possible? I know. We'll make them end their season 2 games on the road in November in Blacksburg, Virginia, second to last game, where it's probably going to be pretty cold. And then Thanksgiving weekend, let's send you to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it's probably going to be snowing out there for that final game. That's how you're going to have to end your season. I mean, honestly, folks, I think the schedule is weird. Like, ultimately, if Miami can fix their defense and if Carson Beck can live up to expectations, only Miami can stop Miami. Like, it's really up to Miami to actually, to achieve their goals and to not slip up, to play more consistently. So if Miami doesn't make the ACC championship game again, I'm not going to blame the schedule for it. I'm only going to blame ourselves for that. But it is, 2 road games to end the year, both in cold weather spots. It doesn't do us any favors, right? The bizarre way that they scheduled the bye weeks, where you have a bye week in late September, and then a game at Florida State, and then another bye week right after. It feels like a waste of the bye weeks. You want to spread those out to maximize rest and recovery. So they screwed us with the bye weeks. The schedule is weird, but at the end of the day, folks, I believe your 2 most difficult games are both non-conference. Opening up the season against Notre Dame will not be easy. And Florida, week 4, doesn't look like it's going to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. Those may be your 2 toughest games. Like, your conference schedule, these games are winnable or toss-ups at the very worst. And if you win the ACC, no matter what happens in your non-conference, you're in the college football playoff. So, I'm not going to say the schedule makers screwed us over, but they did some weird stuff with that schedule. I do like the fact that Miami doesn't leave Florida until November 1st at SMU, which is another potentially tough game. Home against Louisville should be tough. At Florida State could be tough because it's a rivalry game, although I don't know how good Florida State's going to be this year. So the schedule's tougher than last year, no question. But Miami needs to be better than they were last year. You lost Cam Ward. I love Carson Beck. I don't think he's going to be Cam Ward, but I hope he doesn't need to be Cam Ward, because he needed to play hero ball just for Miami to win as many games as they did last year. I don't want Carson to have to do that. I want Miami to be able to make some defensive stops so the offense don't have to put on their Superman capes every single drive. So that's where I'm at with the schedule. We get this one from Stephen Pill, who says, hey, I think Ed Reed would be a great fit for coaching the safeties. What do you think? Man, I guess we're doing this thing again where we're going to link, former Miami Hurricanes players to any open job. I mean, obviously Ed Reed was here before in a kind of a personnel, sort of like a symbolic role up until a couple of years ago. Reed, though, I mean, he's doing his thing. He just became, within the last couple of weeks, the offensive coordinator at Chamblee High School in Georgia, but his son plays for that team. His son, Ed Reed III, is a receiver and defensive back for Chamblee High School. So listen, I respect it. Like, Ed wants to coach his kid. I haven't heard anything about, Reed being in the running to be an assistant coach here. Miami is seemingly looking for a safeties coach, but we don't have to link every former Miami player to every open job. Like, I know we all want Ray Lewis to be the linebackers coach. Let's make Ken Dorsey the quarterbacks coach, Ed Reed the safeties coach. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe at some point Reed will come back home and take a role here, but seems to be happy to be coaching his son out there in high school. We get this one from Jeff in Aiken, South Carolina, who says, hey, in your opinion, where do you see Damari Brown fitting in this defense? I know he'll compete, but do you think he'll win a starting job at corner, or do you see him moving to nickel? I think we kind of answered this already when talking about my two deep. I see Damari competing at multiple different spots. I think if he was going to win a starting job, his path of least resistance would probably be winning the nickel job. Because I would give him a tougher time handicapping him to beat out either Xavier Lucas or OJ Frederic. I could definitely see him potentially being the starting nickel. Charles Brantley is another guy that I see contending for that. But yeah, maybe if he's going to win a starting job, nickel might be the one for him. We get this one from Gilbert, who says, hey, what punishment, if any, will be given to Wisconsin for violating the 48-hour rule to enter Xavier Lucas into the portal? Will we see change in how the portal is regulated so we don't have any more Xavier Lucas cases? Personally, I don't expect the NCAA to do squat. First of all, if Miami isn't the offender, the NCAA usually doesn't act very quickly. Like if the shoe were on the other foot and Miami held a player hostage, we would already have an investigation in progress. They don't seem to be doing anything about Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is trying to sort of preemptively defend themselves for that because of all of their accusing Miami of. And then let's not forget, we've seen, I mean, how many L's has the NCAA taken in court for the past few years? Every time the NCAA tries to punish someone, they just get sued and they lose every single time. The NCAA has no teeth left. So I don't expect him to do anything. I mean, if anything, when it comes to like changes to the transfer portal, I think the Miami side of it, with how Xavier Lucas found a perfectly legal loophole to transfer without ever actually hitting the portal because Wisconsin refused to put him in, I think maybe we'll see more of that. I think if a player already knows their desired destination, maybe we all know that now the transfer portal is not, as all powerful as we thought it was. So that could be a change that I see. Let's see. We get this question from, from Quasi, who says, hey, what do you think the two deep is on the O-line? Do you think we recruit heavy there this year? Because I think we could lose 4 starters at the end of the next season. That's a great point. Now, I already did my two deep for the O-line, but yeah, I mean, Miami obviously is recruiting that unit like crazy. You've got you see Miami trying to land guys like Cannon Pickett and Jackson Cantwell in the upcoming class. Jaden Wilkerson coming in as a true freshman, as a guy we have expectations for. SJ Olofai-Tuli. Like Miami's got a good incoming class of offensive linemen, but you're right. Like there's going to be a void to fill because after this year, Markel Bell's final year of eligibility, he's going to be gone. James Brockermeyer, final year of eligibility at center. Inez Cooper, likely gone. I think this is his final year, actually. CeCe Maui-Noa technically has 2 years left, but CeCe's so good, he'll probably go to the NFL early. So, I mean, yeah, we're going to need to develop these guys very quickly. And maybe you'd like to see some of these, younger guys get spots in the rotation who are more ready to step up in 2026 and beyond. All right, thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. If you have any complaints or feedback about my two deep depth chart, I want you to leave the comments below. Let me know how I screwed up my two deep and what you guys would do differently. And if you're not, watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to the audio version, which is fantastic, I highly recommend, because you don't have to look at me for the entire show. Like, the audio version is great. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You want to leave me an X post, a tweet, if we still call it that, at Locked On Canes, and let me know how you would do your two deep depth chart, or if you like mine just the way it is. And we'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.